Well, good morning and welcome to the PubWorks User Conference Day 2. Today, I'll be covering the service request module in more depth. My name is Tyler Newton. If you're just joining us, thank you. You may see a couple of things again that you saw this morning, but we're going to go into depth just into the service request module in all aspects, going from the desktop version, online service requests, and then service requests in mobile. So a quick overview of what the service request module is. This service request module supports the ability to track status and actions taken and resources consumed for demand maintenance. So that keyword is demand maintenance, and it allows you to accumulate a database for callers. We also have the module that allows you to compile statistics and cost reports to identify problem spots and trends. And then the service request module also allows you to assign requests to supervisors, employees, and respond to citizens with instant and accurate information. That was a quick overview of what the service request module is. Now I'm going to cover, what is the difference between a service request and a work order, and then a service request and activities. Then we'll talk about when is it appropriate to use the service request module. And then the third thing I'm going to cover in this section is what are the basic requirements for creating a service request. So first off, what is a service request in relation to a work order? Well, a service request is excellent at managing demand maintenance. An example of this is there's a big tree down on Babbitt Lane. It's a problem. It's a demand for maintenance that's a current issue. This also allows you to track callers, and then it allows you to do reporting on work done in response to this demand maintenance or these unforeseen issues that come up. Now, work orders, on the other hand, are used for planned maintenance. An example of that is exercising all of your valves every 6 months. It can be used doing the same task at many locations, and it's great for tracking work on projects and group activities. So again, I want to emphasize, work orders are really set up for scheduled maintenance and much more. And this is our plug for tomorrow, where our Ed Mitchell will be covering the work order module. So now let's compare service requests and activities. Well, service requests, like we talked about, are demand maintenance. Well, activities equal work. Service requests are excellent for managing that demand maintenance and tracking it, bundling it together and figuring out, well, is this one issue, or is it a group of issues? Is this a trend? Where activities allow you to track work, a person doing a task at a place with materials and or equipment. So an example of a service request is there's a big tree down in Babbitt Lane and we need to take care of it. It's a problem. Where an example of an activity would be, today I went out and I made sure that the streets were swept on Babbitt Lane. The service request module allows in-depth tracking, specifically for callers, because if we all know that there are callers that call right down the line and call often and frequently. The service request module allows you to track that. Activities is excellent for linking work to service requests. So if you find that you're doing work in relation to an issue, you can always link it to a service request, and we'll go into more depth with that later. And then lastly, service requests allow for reporting done on work to say that a certain type of request has cost us X amount of dollars for the year. So our street sweeping requests have cost us $500,000 would be an example. So when is it appropriate to use the service request module? For demand maintenance. Something is broken and needs to be fixed is the rule of thumb. So the last item I wanted to cover is, or what are the basic requirements for creating a service request? Well, they're system and user defined. So what that means is we allow you to track the information that's only important to you. And when I go into settings later, I'll talk about setting the required fields in a service request so that you can accurately capture the information that you want. Excellent. So moving on, I'm going to cover what the service request dashboard is. we're going to go over the settings for how to turn on the service request dashboard, both system and user. And then we will also go into the service request dashboard for its graphs and filtering, and then also talk about how it will allow you to work with ease. So first off, what is a dashboard? A dashboard is a visualization tool to display the current status and metrics and key performance indicators. So we're all familiar with a dashboard because we've all driven a car before. So a dashboard in a car will tell you the speed, maybe how fast the engine is going, the amount of fuel in your tank, and alert you if there are any problems with the engine. The PubWorks service request dashboard is meant to do the same thing, allow you to see the metrics that are important to you and see them in graphical form and not just a list. It allows you to see trends. So if at any time during this presentation you turn on your own PubWorks and you say, well, wait a second, do I need an update to view the dashboards? My question would be, is your system PubWorks version 5.9 or greater? And if you turn on PubWorks on the top left-hand side, it should say PubWorks and it should say the version. Our most current version is 6.0.15. And if you don't have that, it would be an excellent time to, request an update. And how do you request an update? You can do that by emailing support@pubworks.com. This week, because of the webinar, we're experiencing a high volume of requests, and our plan is to email you and reach out and schedule the request next week. So I'm running PubWorks desktop here on my system. First thing I want to show you is how to turn on the dashboard on your system. If I look in the service request menu, I don't have a dashboard option. Well, how do I turn it on? In order to do that and turn on the service request dashboard for your whole system, what you'll need to do is go to System and System Settings. Now, if System Settings is grayed out for you, that means you're not an administrator in PubWorks, and you can ask one of your administrators and they can go into System Settings and turn this on for you. So once you've clicked on System Settings, what you can do is click on Miscellaneous, and there's a little checkbox here that says Show Dashboards. So I'm going to check that box, and I'm going to click Apply, and that applies the settings and leaves this screen open. If I were to click OK, it would apply the settings and close the screen. We'll just leave it open for a second. The next thing I want to do is point out that, well, service request dashboard hasn't shown up yet. Well, I've turned it on for our system, but I haven't given myself the user powers to be able to see the service request dashboard. And turning that on is also easy. So I can go here to System and User Powers. And this is a user-defined setting. So not all of the users in your system need the dashboard. And that's why we've allowed you to have the permission to turn it on or turn it off for a user. So once I've gone to my user powers, I can click here on service requests and check dashboard, and I can click save. And now that I've done that, I can click on service request, and I have the service request dashboard. Now, if you have any questions on anything that we show you today, feel free to contact support. It's support@pubworks.com, or you can call us at 888-920-0380 and extension 708. Or you can call 888-920-0380 and extension 2 rings the support desk, and that'll be anyone who's on support during our support hours. So let me just close the user powers and the system settings. Alan, do we have a question?
Just a quick question here. Is there an easy way to find and fix callers that have been put in more than once?
Yes, it's something we call caller consolidation, and there's a menu item for it. Right here in service request, there's caller consolidation, and in order to be able to get to this menu for caller consolidation, you need to be an administrator, because what you're doing is you're merging two callers or more than one caller that's put together. And what you simply do is you can select one caller. For example, I saw that there was a Mike Anzalone and a Pete Anzalone. If I say, well, Pete's middle name is Mike, I can click here on Mike, and I can click here on Pete. And what I can do is this form says I want to move all the linked caller information from the first caller and push it into the second. And then I also have the option of removing the first caller. Now, the reason why this is an administrator setting is because there is no back button, there is no undo. And it is something that you don't really want everyone to be able to go in and mess with. Now, if I click OK, what I've just done is it says, are you certain? Are you absolutely certain that you want to get rid of Mike Anzalone and make all the requests go to P Anzalone? And I'll say yes. And it says that it's done the operation, and it asks me if I want to do it again. And I don't have any more consolidation, so. I hope that answered your question, and then we'll just move on. If you have any more questions with that, feel free to email me at tyler@pubworks.com, and I can go into more depth with you on that. So going along, now that we've turned on go ahead, Alan.
You're right. Sorry about that. Sorry for the interruption. Carrie Williams wanted to say, don't forget to remind everyone that everyone has to be at a PubWorks except for the person consolidating. Thanks, Gary.
That's true. Great. So going back, we've turned on the PubWorks service request dashboard. And if I click on the dashboard, you'll see that the dashboard will load. Now, you'll notice a few things. This opens to the status type and department tab. There's another tab that we're going to cover later. And it opens in the exact same form as if you were to open up the service request in the service request log screen. And so let me show you what I mean. Your user powers for filtering by department or assignee are the same in this screen as the service request status screen. And the auto refresh is the same. So let me open up the service request status screen, and you'll see that the settings in your user powers for filtering by department and the auto refresh are exactly the same. Now, if you have questions about turning on auto refresh, you can contact support, and during an update, we can turn that on for you because that is an INI setting. For the auto filters for department and for assignee, you can change those in your user power. So let me just show you what I mean by that. If you go to System and User Powers, you can click on Service Requests, and there's a little checkbox right here that says Filter Service Request Status by Employee Department, and that's the reason why my department was automatically filled in the service request dashboard and the service request status screen. Now, if I had also checked service request status by employee, then when I would close and open the screen, it would open back up. So those two settings are extremely important. If you want to see just the service request for your department, then I check this lower option. Or if you want to see just the service requests for yourself, you check the option above. So moving on to the service request dashboard, you're able to see 3 pie graphs. And this first one looks really boring because it's auto filtering to the open status. And this shows you the distribution of requests that are open versus closed. So if I were to clear this filter, all of a sudden you'll see that there are now 3 slices of the pie showing the open, the closed, the denied, and the deferred. And this graph here really represents all of the options that people can choose for the service request status. So let me open up a service request real quick and show you what I mean. That's all the things on this drop-down list on the status, and that's what this request by status graph shows you. Now, these graphs are completely interactive, so if you want to click on one of the slices of the pie, it will auto-filter. So if I click on open, it's going to put in the status open here, and it works great. Now, if you wanted to add a status to your service requests, You can always do that using the service request menu, clicking on status values, and then adding it here. So I clicked on service requests and status values, and these are all the values that I could do. So I could add by typing in the grid here and clicking save, but that's not really relevant for what we're discussing. So going back to the service request dashboard, these graphs are completely interactive, and as you click on one or the other, it will filter for those options. So the service request status filtering I'll leave open set, and we'll move on to the next graph. So this is the request by type, and this shows you the types of requests that you've gotten, very similar to if you're looking at the service request itself and clicking on the request type. It's all of the options here that have been assigned to your department or the filtering that you've had. And if you mouse over one or the other of them, it will tell you the count of the service requests that have been assigned to you and the percentage that count makes up for. So we've had one special event request that accounts for 6.25% of our requests. Now the third graph here is your request by department, and this graph looks rather boring right now because it's filtering out just the things in the road and bridge. But if I clear out the filter, hold on one second, excuse me. So if I look at the request by department, you can see all of the department requests that have come in, and you'll notice the graphs change intermittently. So I can filter this out by clicking here to choose a specific department, or I can choose the option from the list. Now, the graphs themselves will auto-filter the status, request type, and department, but we also allow for you to sort by priority, district, and assignee. So if you wanted to see all the requests for Tim Lake, like what we were looking at earlier with Tina, I can clear out the filtering here and just look at requests set up for Tim Lake. So here are all the requests that have ever been assigned to him. And from there, I can look at everything maybe month to date. And it looks like he's had just one in this data. And the data that we're looking at isn't the live data that Tina was using earlier, but we'll get into that a little later and show you some things. Now, the service request dashboard does not save your settings as you open and close it. So every time you open it, it will open with those user-defined preferences. Now, the date range filtering here at the bottom also allows for you to see the requests over a certain amount of dates. So if you only want to see things month to date or quarter to date, it may allow for you to see trends a little bit better for what's going on seasonally. Now, the second tab in the service request dashboard is the time frame and open days. So if I click on that, you'll be able to see the service requests open time frame. So how many days that each request has been open. And then as of right now, the filtering is set to put the x-axis of this graph by month. And then the date range filtering says only show quarter to date, and that's why it's only showing 3 months. So if I were to change this to year to date, then all of a sudden there are 12 options. And you can see that we've gotten a lot more requests in November than we had the rest of the year. Now the graph at the bottom shows you the request days that are open. So we have 31 requests that have been open 11 days, and we've got, it looks like there are 5 requests that have been open 196 days. And that's, really the conclusion of the service request dashboard. What, this really will allow you to see is graphical representation of what's going on in your system. Now, the service request dashboard is very similar to what we've seen in the service request status screen, and in the fact that it allows you to see the grid of the requests that you've entered and the options that you've chosen. So if you filtered all the open requests for the road and bridge department. These are all the requests that are open there. So if I want to take a look at one of them, I can double click on the row and it will open up the service request. Now, if I wanted to sort by the column, I can click on the column, any column, and it will sort alphabetically. And if I click on it again, it'll sort in reverse alphabetical order or descending order. And that covers the service request dashboard. So the next thing I want to cover is duplicate detection. We were on site in Montgomery County, Precinct 3, and they requested some enhancements, and one of them was they have frequent callers, people who call in all the time and may call one administrator and leave a message, and then call a second administrator and leave a message, and then call a third administrator and leave a message. And what you'd end up having is 3 service requests for the same issue come in. So it would look like there are 3 service requests for this issue when really it's just one, and it's one person calling over and over again. So what we've done is we've added a setting or a group of settings in PubWorks to warn you that there are requests that may be duplicated. So let me go into a service request and service request settings and open up the service request settings menu. And I'm going to just set it over here on the right. And I want to point out a few things. So the service request duplicate detection settings are right here on the top right-hand side of the service request settings form, and it allows you to set a logical check every time a service request is made to say, well, you know, has a service request similar to this been created in our system recently? So let me get rid of this pen for just a minute. Let me remove priority and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to click apply to apply that setting, and I'm going to go to the service request log and I'm going to create a service request. And that service request will be an ICE issue on Babbitt Lane. And I'm going to click save. Oh, it looks like I need to add one more thing. So if I click save, PubWorks will create the service request without issue. Now, if I were to click add again and click on ice removal and click on Babbitt Lane, type in PubWorks has done the logic and said there's one service request that's already on file for similar values. Well, what those similar values are the settings that you've set here in the service request duplicate detection. And it can be very specific, like the exact same caller on the exact same day and the exact same issue, or it can be very broad, like the same type of request at the same location. It's really up to you to determine what's important for you to do that. Now, if I click no on this warning, are you certain you wish to save this request? It does not save the request. But if I were to click this again and then click yes, what it's done is it's created the request. So it gives you the option in the warning. Now, a few other things I'd like to note since we're looking at service requests are the required fields. Now, there were a couple of questions this morning talking about required fields and saying, you know, is it how do you set the required fields in mobile versus PubWorks desktop? And what we would suggest is setting the required fields that are in mobile equal to your service request settings. And you do that by checking the box here. So if it's required, if you have mobile and it does require, say, a caller last name, then I would say set the required field in your service request settings and click OK or apply. And then your settings are the same so that any service request created in mobile, you know, when you go to edit that request in PubWorks desktop, it doesn't ask for you to add a caller or to add a department or assignee if that's something that's required mobile. Now, the service request settings are for everyone on your system, and they're typically only able to be adjusted by an administrator. So I would say if you're an administrator, you can do this, or if you don't have access to the service request settings, maybe contact your administrator and make the requests that you can have. Go ahead, Ellen.
Sorry, quick question. Will this do the same on online fleet requests as well?
There is a required settings for online fleet requests, and it would be the same logic. So just to step out for a second. So there's fleet service requests that are in the fleet module. It's very similar to service requests that we have, but it's only for rolling stock. And there is a set of fleet service request settings, and there are a set of required fields just like in your service requests.
Thank you.
No problem. Now, there are a few hidden gems that I want to point out with service requests in the service request settings, things that people have asked for, or things that we do follow-up training, and we'll show people every once in a while, and they go, "Oh, geez, that's awesome." The first one I want to point out is this setting right here that says track assignment via contact notes. And so what does that mean? Well, let's look at a service request and change the assignee and see what happens. So if I'm in a service request here and I'm Connie and I just check, oh, well, I don't want this request anymore, and I click save, it changes it to somebody else, but it doesn't track, well, it was assigned to Connie and now it's assigned to Stephen. So what we've done is we've made it so that if you turn on the setting and then click apply, when you're in the service request and the service request, there we go. So if you're in the service request and you turn this on and the service request log, now if I change this from Connie to Charles and click save, what happens is that the program will add a note saying, the user CP on 12/6 at 11:54 assign this to Charles. And I would suggest turning that on in your system if you have, because you're able to see it. Now, what I mean by that is you can see where this request gets assigned once it's created, and allows for accountability for how a request comes in. So if you're one of our clients in Texas and a request comes in for, say, a driveway install, a driveway install in Texas means that they'll go in and they'll put in a culvert, and the culvert crew gets the request and they do the work, and then you assign it from the culvert crew to the curb and gutter crew, and that they'll work on the request and add the curb and gutter, and then they'll assign it to the paving team, and the paving team that goes and paves near the driveway and looks at the entrance. So that pass off from one department to the next gets tracked, and we find it's extremely helpful. We also put it in the report, so if you're taking this request and you're going to print it off or send it out, you can click on reports, and this service request with grid, and it's going to pull out the report in print preview mode, and you can see that there's a note right here saying on 12/6 at 10:54, this was assigned from Connie to Charles. Now, another thing that I want to show you is this activity auto close. A lot of people will log work on a service request. For example, let me find an open request. So I've got this ice removal request that we've just created, and I'm going to log work on it. So to log work on a service request, one of the easiest way you can do it is you can click this Add Work button under Daily Activities, and I'm going to log work on the service request. And because I've added the work here, it's auto-filled the service request number. It also has included the location of where I was, and I can type in the task of what I was doing. And we'll say that we're doing some snow plowing. It took an hour. And now when I click save, what it's going to do is it's going to auto close the service request, and then it's going to prompt to add a note because I have this setting right here turned on. So I'll click save, and it'll say the service request 2131 is being closed. Do you want to add a comment? And I can say, yes, I drove down and took care of the ice. So I've created the work record, and you can see the work record here, but if I go back to the service request, you'll see that its status has changed from open to closed, and you know, there's a closing note to say I drove down and I took care of the ice. So having the auto close with the prompt is fantastic, because then you know why the service request is closed, and it prevents you from accidentally closing a request without it saying, hey, you're closing a request. If you have any questions about that, feel free to contact support and we can go into that more later. Now, a few questions we had this morning. Oh, another question, Ellen?
This was from a few minutes previous, but can duplicate detection settings be used when you have a different caller but the same road and same issue?
Yeah. So if you were to set this up so that the location and the request and the status were the same, just like I've done here, you can have two different callers, and it would warn you saying that there's already a request for that location.
Okay, thank you. Let me just make sure we don't have any other questions at this time. All clear. Okay, great. Okay,
perfect. So, one of the questions is once a request has come in, how do we get it to the staff? Because what can happen is a request will come in and it's there at the office, but the guys are out in the field all the time. So how do we get a request to them? So I'm gonna step out of the PubWorks that I'm in right now, and I'm gonna go into the PubWorks that's in our cloud. So I'm looking at the cloud data, and I'm looking at the service request status. So I've clicked here and I've gone to service request status for Charles Greenlee. So if a request comes in, I can pretend like I'm the person in the office for just a moment, and we'll create a new request for Charles. We'll watch it show up here, and then we'll talk about all the ways that we can get the request to Charles. So, so we'll say that there's an animal control issue, and that the cat's out of the bag, and the cat's out of the bag on Baldwin Lane. So, well, that's, it's nice that the request is created, and if Charles is out in the field, he won't get it immediately if it just sits here. So how can we get the request to Charles? Well, if he comes in the next morning and he opens up the service request status screen, he'll be able to see this animal control issue, which is the service request 2188. And he can see it in the service request status, and he can say, oh, I need to go take care of the issue. Well, that doesn't work all the time, especially when there are things like animal control issues or signs down, specifically stop signs. Those issues need to be taken care of almost as soon as possible. So one way that we can do it is we can click here on reports, and we can email the service request. So if I click email the service request, what it's going to do is it's going to make a call out to my Outlook, and it's going to open the service request. And I can send the email to him if he has a smartphone out in the field. So PubWorks is doing that now. I see that it's decided to come up. So here's the service request, and I can send this request directly to Charles Greenlee and everyone else in the department saying, hey, you need to take care of this animal control issue. Another option that we could do is, I could click here on reports. I could print this service request or print this service request with grid, and that'll open up the service request in the print preview mode. I can click print, I can print it out and then run it to him, or I can put it in his inbox to have it be looked at when he comes in at lunch. Now, I like this report because it includes all of the notes that go in, just not only the description, but the caller contact notes if somebody's called a few times. And that way, if you have this report in hand and you're out in the field and someone comes to talk to you and they introduce themselves, you might say, oh yeah, you're the person that called and it looked like you called last Tuesday or you called this morning, and you can take care of it. Now, another way to see the reports is if Charles has PubWorks Mobile, he can see the request out in the field. So I'm gonna pause for just a moment, and I'm gonna queue up the mobile tablet that I have, and I have a Samsung Galaxy 2 sitting here on my desk. There you go. So if I'm here in PubWorks Mobile on the tablet, I can click on Requests, and there it is, the service request for animal control, number 2188, says that I have a service request and I need to take care of it. So if I click on this request, what it's doing is it's saying, here's the request. And I could read that there's a cat out of the bag on Baldwin Lane. Now if I click on edit, I can go down here and say, let me add a note. Couldn't find the cat. Now if I scroll to the top of the request here, I can click save, and that request and that information will go back to home office. Now, I gave the example a little bit earlier saying, oh, you need to set your required fields in mobile equal to what you have here, and it looks like it didn't go through. So it looks like I need to add the caller information. So if Charles is out in the field, he can go and look at the request. Now, not wanting to get too far ahead, but if he's in the field, he can also log work on this. And if he clicks edit, he can go down to the bottom and click add work and log work. So if he did take care of this issue, he can add a task. And time. And click save. So that's another way of getting the service request to Charles. So we've shown you how to see a service request that comes in from the desktop and then have it go to the mobile device, and then how you can take care of it. We talked about how you can print off the request and put it in their mailbox, or you can email the person the request. So that there's more than one way to get a request out into the field. Perfect. Now, I'm going to step out of the PubWorks cloud database. I'm going to go back into my database, and we're going to talk about scheduling of service requests because we have the service request calendar, which is another gem of PubWorks, and it can be found on service requests in the service request calendar menu. Now, if you're clicking on service requests and you don't see the service request calendar, that means you need to turn it on in your system settings. And how do you do that? We'll go to System, and if I click on System Settings, under Miscellaneous, right here next to Dashboards is the Show Service Request Calendar button. And so I've checked it and I've clicked OK, and you can see the service request calendar. So let me open up the calendar and take a look. I've gone ahead and prepped this so that we can see that there's a few service requests assigned to me, and I'm signed in as Connie Pemberton. And looking at the rest of Wednesday after the webinar is over, it looks like I'm supposed to go out and take care of some dust control service requests. Now, how does a service request show up on this service request calendar? Well, let me show you. each service request in the service request log has a little section here that will allow for you to schedule out a request. So if I put these side by side, you can see that this service request 2128 is scheduled for today at 3 p.m. And so today at 3 p.m. You can see 2128. Now the service request appointment calendar has more than one view. You can view just today's work. You can do Monday to Friday view, or you can see the full week, including the weekends. So if you have crews that work 7 days a week, then you can schedule service requests to be taken care of 7 days a week. Now let me just take a look at the day view, and you can see all of the service requests that I've assigned. Well, you might be saying, well, our service request doesn't take an hour, or maybe it takes 15 minutes. How come it says the time slot is sectioned by an hour? Well, in the service request settings, so I'll go to service request settings, there is a little section right here that says calendar time slot intervals, and I've selected 60-minute intervals. Now, if I click on this drop list, you can see that we've got options for 15, 20, 30, and 60. And those aren't user-defined settings. Those are settings that we've gotten feedback from customers, and they said that they want those options, so that's what we've given them. Now, when a service request is assigned and you do have it scheduled out, you can see what's there for you. And you can double click on any row and it will allow you to change the appointment calendar. So if I wanted to say, well, I really don't want to do this at 1 o'clock, I want to do it at 6 o'clock tonight, I can choose 6 o'clock. I can click save. And it says, hey, this service request has already got an appointment for 1 o'clock today. Are you sure you want to update? And I can click yes. And it moves it from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Now, typically when you double click on a row, it doesn't allow you it pulls up the record. It doesn't just pull up an appointment. So how do I pull up the service request 2125? Well, it's really simple. There's a display service request button here at the bottom of the screen. And if I click on it, that displays service request 2125. Now the filtering options and the radio buttons they work the same as all the other screens in PubWorks. If I choose the month view or the full week view or the day view, you'll see that the options change at the top. We always tell you how many records you're looking at and the filtering time frame. And then if you change the drop-down list, so if I only want to see things assigned to Connie, it'll display that. So let me go here to the Monday through Friday view. You'll notice that there's something assigned to Bob and some things assigned to Connie. If I don't want to see the things assigned to Bob, I can change this filtering to show just the things that are set up for Connie. So let me show you that. If I type in Connie's information and then hit tab, the stuff for Bill disappears and then you're not looking at other people's stuff. So it allows each user to schedule out requests specifically for themselves. And then if they need to, they can also look around to see if other people in their department or in their section can, are also scheduling things. Now, if I go back to the day view, this works very similar to all our other screens. Pete talked about this export to CSV yesterday. Tina talked about export to CSV this morning. And yeah, the export to comma separated values, if I click here, I can export this out to a CSV file. And what that does is it creates a file. I'll put it on my desktop. And now if I open that up, I can look at it in just a text format, which would be rather boring because it'd just be comma separated values, or I can open it up in Excel. So if I open this up in Excel, and this format can be imported into your Outlook calendar. So know that option is there. Now, the last thing I want to cover before we're done today is the linking work to service requests. What I want to do is look at the service requests that are out there and then attach them to work. I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but in the service request log, or looking at any service request record, you can look at a request, and there's a place for you to add work. So it says add work, and I can click on daily or crew. And what this means is when I click on either form, it will open up the daily or crew activity. Now, about a year ago, we added this enhancement, or maybe a year and a half ago. So when I click on add work for daily, what it does is it opens up the daily activity form, and it fills out the service request that we're working at and the location, and saves a few steps. Now, you're still able to log work on a service request in a daily activity. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if I have just the daily activity screen open, I can click on add, and then I can type in the number 2130 and hit tab and log work too. Now, instead of going to PubWorks data, daily activities, and then keying that in, we found it a lot easier to just add an add work button. So for this request, I'm gonna say that we took care of the work. And it was ice removal, so we'll say we were snow plowing, snow removal. And it closes the request. Now you'll notice if we go back to the service request, there's a little asterisk here that shows that there's activity and work that's done. Some service requests only take one activity to have to be closed. Other ones take more than one, like I talked about with the service request for a driveway install in Texas. So if a crew were to go back out there and take care of this ice event again, or if more ice was built up, you can log a crew activity on this too. So let me change the status back to open for just a moment, and because I have auto close still turned on. And I'll click on crew. And you'll notice that it automatically fills the service request and the location again. And now I can select a crew, or I can select an employee and time for her and a piece of equipment that she was working on or working with. And then I can also add a second employee and a second piece of equipment. Might be overkill to use a Caterpillar D7 to take care of ice, but now if you ever do make the mistake of not keying in all the information in PubWorks, PubWorks will warn you and say, hey, you forgot to fill out part of the form, and see it saying or telling me you must select a task. So when I click OK, it's going to put the cursor right here in tasks, and it'll tell me that I need to add more. And that's how you can also add a crew activity to a service request. So if I go back to this service request, you'll see that it's closed again. And now there's two pieces, or three activity records associated with it. The one daily activity and then the two crew members that worked on it. Now, the last thing that I want to cover, and it's really a preview for maybe some of the stuff that Ed will cover tomorrow, is if you have a group of service requests, for instance, if you're in Colorado and throughout the winter season you get requests for pothole repairs, and you want to group them together and then put them or attach them to a work order, you can do that. So let me show you what I mean by that. In work orders, which is planned maintenance, you can plan out how to take care of service requests. And the thing that you need to do that is you need to make sure that you have an asset task plan for the task that you're going to associate it with, and I've already done that. So let me show you what I mean. If I click on asset task plans, I can click here, and there's already a pothole repair asset task plan set up in work order, saying that for this task called pothole repairs, we do that task on a road, and it's not reoccurring. Ed will go into much more depth about the work order module tomorrow, and he'll talk about these, reoccurring work orders. Excuse me. So now that I know that I have my asset task plan, I can group all the service requests that I have for potholes and create one work order so that I can give it to a crew, and then they can take out the pothole repair truck and the asphalt trailer and go and take care of them. So if I go to work orders and click on work order, I can add a new work order called pothole list for 2018. And I can click add service requests. And when I do that, it allows me to search service requests for specific issue. So let me click here for request type and select pothole repair, potholes. And so here's a list of all the pothole requests that are open in my system. And if I check these boxes here, I can then say I want to do a task called pothole repair. And I can add those work items to this work order. So once they're here, I can click save, and all of the service requests have been associated with the work order, and I can click save. I'm going to look at one more thing here. If you double click on any row of the work order, it'll pull up the service request, and it'll also tell you that this service request has been associated with the work order. Now, one of the questions we get a lot of times when we go to show the PubWorks dashboard is they say, that's great, but I want to report with similar information. So let me go over some of the service request reports that have a few graphs that are similar to the service request dashboard. So if I click here on reports and go to service request reports, I can look at all the service requests associated with a specific department. So let me click on the road and bridge department, and I can say that I want to see everything that came in this year, and I can look at the request type distribution or the statistical summary. So we'll go with the request type distribution first, and we can see all the service requests that have come in for our department, how many of them there were, how many days they were open on average, and then what percentage those requests made up in graphic form. Now, another great report that will show you the statistical analysis of like what is open versus what is closed on your system is the statistical summary. And if I open that up, you'll be able to see all the service requests that are open versus closed in your system currently. Are there any other questions?
Yep. I have one question from Rob. When working in work orders, and let's say you highlight 5 sewer mains to clean, can you divide the time up differently? Excuse me. Do you want me to repeat that?
I think the question is can you say that one sewer main took longer to clean than the others on a work order?
Yes.
Okay. Now I don't have the data queued up exactly, and with the nature of which we use work orders to average or take care of the cost. The quick answer is if there's a great discrepancy between cleaning one object versus the other, it may be better to log that as a crew activity. But we do allow for task units to be used, and these units can be not just each, it can be hours or extra hours used. So if I click edit here for a minute, and this is going into depth in work orders, first I need to schedule this. Let me schedule it for today, and click schedule, and then save, and then add a new work date, which will also be for today. You'll see that this becomes available. So I can say that I did 2 of these requests, and one of these I did a task units of 10. There were 10 potholes on that road, and then for this one, we'll say that there was just 2. So that's one way that you can differentiate between one thing taking longer than the other. The other way, let me add some resources to this so I can click save. They're big potholes. So now it's going to close the request, but it takes that time and separates it evenly between the 2. But then you could use the unit cost summary in your reports to figure out that one outlet took a lot longer to clean than the others, and that there's a discrepancy. Is there another question?
Yes. I don't have a work orders tab for my service requests. How do I get it?
If you don't have a work orders tab on your service requests, I think what you're saying is there isn't a work order option here. Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying that in the service request and the service request log, there isn't a tab here?
Gloria, can you clarify?
This work orders part is always grayed out, but if you're not able to see the work orders drop list here, that means that you don't have the work orders module, which we'd love to talk to you about if you're interested in. So that may be the case on why that's not visible for you.
Okay, she responded. She said, I don't have a tab on my drop list.
Okay, yeah, and that means that you don't have the work orders module. And if you're interested in planned work and work orders, I would say you can contact us, and that's sales@pubworks.com, and we'd be happy to help.
Okay, one more here from Kevin. If I wanted to use the work order module and tie in the service requests for listing only.
For listing only? Yeah, I guess you could do that. You could create requests that are open, and then you could print out the request. So what I mean by that is, we'll go back here to the pothole request. You can have this set of work orders here. You can click on reports and this work order with create and to do only. So you could print this off and give it to your crew, and they could take care of it and fill it out, and then you could enter the date, the activities separately in daily activities. So that would be one way to group work and then log it a different way.
And then would the service request be closed using crew activities as usual?
Yeah, you could do that. So let me show you. So if your crew went and took care of it, you could look up the work order once they filled out the form that I was just displaying. You could double click on the row, and then you could click crew activity, and you could say, we took care of this. And that closes the request. Oh, here, let me show you. Let me refresh that. And then that request would be closed, and we've logged work on it. Now logging work on it wouldn't automatically make it come out of the work order, so there'd be some finessing so that your data integrity would be good that you'd need to do. Now there was one more question that we had earlier with Tina, and that the person had said that they added notes in the mobile section of requests, and they weren't able to see it and print it out. And I tested it while we were, I was listening along, and I wanted to just go over that for a second. And for the request that they were talking about, we had a request for Tim Lake, and that the request number was 2186. So I went in to look at it. So this is the request, 2186, and this was acknowledged by Tim this morning. So you can see that it was acknowledged on the PubWorks mobile. And if you want to print that out, you can click here on reports, and this service request with grid. And that service request with grid does have that contact note information with the note that was added there.
And Tyler, so, I think that the question this morning was the notes that are attached to the activities themselves.
Oh, the activity notes. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I am going to be looking into that.
Okay. Thanks, Tina.
Okay. Another question has just come in. Is there a report that allows me to see the number of service requests that we've had this year?
Sure. So let me show you that. Let me step out of the cloud data and go here. So you can do it by department, or you can do it total. So let me go here to the reports and service request reports. If I do a cost summary for this year, or I can do a status summary for this year, I can click OK. And these are all the service requests that you had this year. And at the end of the report, they're totaled up. So you've had 101.
And can you export that into a PDF?
Yes. So if you have this report and you're ready to put it into a PDF that shows you've got 101 service requests, there's a export button here on the top left-hand side of all of our reports in Crystal. So if I click on the export button, you're able to export it out. I can choose Adobe PDF. I can choose Crystal reports. I can export this right out into to text format. And I can click OK and do it there. My personal preference is I like to click print here, and then I print it using Adobe PDF. And that way I can create this document. It's going to show up here in just a sec. And so what I've done is it's created the report just in PDF form on my desktop, and it's just taking a second. And so here's the report in PDF form. So if I wanted to take this and add it to an email, I could email it really easily. So here's the PDF form, and here's the Crystal reports.
Thank you. Last one that I'm seeing is that, are there any service request reports that have graphs like the dashboard?
Right. So like we were talking about, the service request statistical summary and the service request distribution are the two that are very similar to the dashboard. I've got the service request distribution by request type up on my screen, but I'm gonna change it so it's filtered just ever so slightly, and I can do a compare and contrast showing you the difference between those two. So request type distribution, and I'll use it just for one department, road and bridge. And so here's the report. And then if I open up the dashboard, one sec. Oh, it's not going to allow me to do it if I've closed it. I'll open up the dashboard first and then open up the report. So if I want to see a graph exactly like this service request type, I'll go here to reports, service request reports, and pull up the request type distribution for road and bridge for this year. And why is that slightly different? Because I need to change this to year to date. And so this report is exactly this graph.
Thank you. Another question. If there are 7 parks in which trash removal is done in 2 hours with 2 employees, how would it be entered?
Well, there's more than one way to do it. You could do what's known as a route activity, which we haven't talked about at all, where you can create a route in your system, and that route would have the 7 parks where you're working. I know that they've done this in Snowmass Village with their pet ups, or what they call, or the doggy poop bags. They refill those stations, and they've added a spot for every location where they've got to add those bags, and then they log what's known as a route activity on that route for that day. So I can click add and do it. Now that covers 1 employee doing it, but not 2. The alternative is if you're using 2 employees, would be to create a work order with 7 locations and 7 tasks being trash pickup, and then you can log the work for the 2 employees at the 7 locations.
Okay, that seems to be all of the questions that I've received so far. If you do have additional questions, and we just need to move on at this point, just feel free to email support@pubworks.com, and they'll take care of you, or just call them 888-920-0380 extension 2. But Tyler, is that everything?
That's everything on my end. Thank you all for attending this year's user conference.